Okay, having said that, very much welcome to this class. This is the last time I'm going to have the pleasure of teaching you. So I have to start off by thanking all of you for 2 good semesters. Always pretty much the same faces that join the class. Normally about, say, 20 to 30 students that join the class out of a class of registered students for part-time in excess of 200. But always the same 20 to 30 that join the classes. Pretty sure the rest of them listen to the recordings afterwards. That is why I record the classes. Class attendance isn't compulsory, but it is nice to have participation. It is nice to see, if not your faces, at least your photographs, your avatars on the screen in front of me while I teach. It makes it a little bit more personal. It has been a pleasure teaching you. You have been a lovely class. Also, the way you conducted yourself on the WhatsApp group, everything has been really pleasurable. So, my last class, it's not going to be long. It's not a revision class as such. I am not going to do revision now of 15 units. Not even going to try to revise 15 units in a single class. It's also not necessary. So it's not a revision class. It's an exam preparation class. It's going to give you a couple of hints, a couple of things to concentrate on. Of course, I'm just sharing my screen. Thumbs up quickly if you can see my screen. It's just a blank page. Thank you, Mr. Shiweda, Ms. Plaike, Evelina, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the layout of the exam. Mr. Shiweda, your hand is up. Is that a question that you want to ask? No, he was just waving at me. I'm going to point out certain things that you have to concentrate on. That does not mean that you can ignore the rest of it, but it will give you some guidelines. So let's look at the layout firstly of the examination. So my exams pretty much always follow a standard layout. I have a standard way of setting up exams. So obviously, question 1 is multiple choice. 20 questions at 2 marks each gives us 40%. Just going to type out the layout first, and then I'll go back to discuss. Question 2. Your short knowledge-based questions. You're used to them by now. I always have them in the exam. Straightforward knowledge-based questions. Sorry, I didn't want to do that. That's what I wanted to do. So your knowledge-based raise questions. Short questions. Question 3. Is a case study. For 10 marks. Question 4. Case study with 2 sub-questions, 5 marks each. So that is 5 plus 5 gives us 10 marks. And then question 5. Also a case study with 2 sub-questions. Five plus 10. That gives you 15 marks. Okay, I've got too many marks here. So that is 5 plus 5. So that's 10 marks. So we've got so far 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And then question 6. Similarly, a case study. Sorry, I'm sort of navigating between 2 windows here on my screen. So this is 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 5. Gives us 15 marks. Okay, so that is the layout of the exam. That is what your exam is going to look like. So your multiple choice, now let's start discussing this. Don't need to say much about multiple choice. I'm a little bit tied up at the moment with a variety of things that I have to do. But roundabout maybe later tomorrow or Saturday, I have been requested to set up a practice quiz for you. I will do that. Yes?
Sorry, there by question 6, you made a mistake. You said 15 instead of...
Oh, sorry. No, sorry, that is 10. And that one is also 10 marks. Thank you for pointing that out. So it's 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 marks in total. So your multiple choice, 40 marks out of 100, that's almost 50%. You should know by now that if you do well in your multiple choice, it makes it so much easier to pass the exam. Whereas if you do poorly in your multiple choice, if you end up getting something like 10 out of 40 or 12 out of 40 for your multiple choice, you have to do really well in the rest of the exam. So take your time with your multiple choice. I will, as I said, I'll set up a practice quiz for you that you can use to practice, but don't do the quiz and try to memorize the answers. Firstly, because on Moodle, the options A, B, C, D are shuffled. So if you get the question in Moodle and the answer is A, and it's correct, you might get exactly the same question in the test, but the correct option might be option C. So just remembering that's the question and the answer is A, you're going to fail. Try to understand why this is the correct answer, why that was the wrong answer. So question 2, your knowledge-based answers. Studying. Straightforward. What's your mark allocation? If it's a 3-mark question, 3 lines. If it's a 3-mark question, you end up writing half a page. You're probably writing nonsense. So what's your mark allocation? Read your questions carefully to give me exactly what I have asked. Yeah, read your questions carefully. If I say name something, then you need to name it. You don't need to discuss them. Then you just list. If I'm asking what are the requirements, once again, you just need to briefly state them. You don't need to discuss them in detail. This is important. If I'm asking you what is the difference between, I need you to distinguish, point out the differences. What is the difference between does not mean give two definitions. That's important. If you just give me 2 definitions and not illustrate what is the difference, you aren't going to be getting marks. You could even do it in tabular form. You don't have to do it in tabular form, but you can. Let's give you an example. Let's say I'm asking you, I'm going to do it here in tabular form. What is the example? What is the difference between buying back shares in terms of section, what is it, of the Act, might be 98, I'm not sure now, or redemption. This is something that I pointed out to you when we were doing, what was it, Unit 5, capital of a company, when we learned about preference shares and we learned about the redemption of preference shares. I told you at the time that to redeem preference shares essentially means to buy back preference shares. But be careful, don't refer to buying back of preference shares. Because there is another procedure which we subsequently did in, what was it, Unit 13. Unit 13 deals with capital maintenance. We did buying back of shares. So what is the difference between these two procedures? Buying back of shares can be any type of share. Redemption of preference shares only applies to preference shares. What is another difference? See if you can figure it out. Can anybody take a guess? A very big difference. When a company buys back its shares or when it redeems its preference shares, it pays the shareholders. Where does this money come from? Can you remember the redemption of preference shares? They restricted as to where the money can come from. Can you remember that? Or is that your memory a bit hazy about that? Can't you remember that well?
Yes, ma'am. Does it come from the revenue from the money that they make from how do they say, selling fresh shares?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Khwamus. I have long been looking at your name written in front of me and not wanting to try to actually call you by your first name because I realize that it requires of me to make a click sound. How do you pronounce your name?
Godako.
Okay, I'm going to stick to Ms. Khwamus if that's fine with you. I don't think my tongue can make that sound. But yes, you are quite correct. Redemption of preference shares can only be paid from the income of fresh of shares, whereas, or from the divisible profit. Whereas buying back of shares can come from any source of funds. So those are your two main differences between buying back shares and the redemption of preference shares. Now, buying back of shares, there's a lot of other requirements, which of course you have to know because you can get a question relating to the buying back of shares. It's Unit 13. Capital maintenance. And some of the requirements are, for example, is that it must be authorized in the Constitution. There must be a special resolution. The company must be solvent and liquid. These are just some of the requirements. But if I have asked you, what is the difference between buying back shares and the redemption of preference shares? I don't want to know about a special resolution and solvency and liquidity, blah, 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 blah. That's got nothing to do with comparing buying back versus redemption. Don't discuss the buying back and discuss the redemption of preference shares. That's not what the question is asking for. It's 4 marks. Any type of share versus preference shares. Any source of funds versus only from the fresh issue of shares. Read your question. Having said that, while we're talking about capital maintenance, because this is now a convenient segue into discussing capital maintenance. Remember, if you get a question relating to capital maintenance, I told you this when I was teaching you, be specific in your answer. Relate. Your answer to the case study. Because, and of course, your first point of call when you start doing that, in order to, you need to actually read the question carefully and take note of, is this a private company or a public company? That's going to make a difference to your answer. So what do I mean by be specific? There must be a special resolution approving the transaction. But in terms of the Act, this special resolution can be one of two. It can either be a general approval which is valid, applies to all shareholders of a specific class of shares, and is valid until the next annual general meeting. Or it can be a specific approval, which refers to a specific shareholder. Now, if you're answering this question, it must be a special resolution approving the transaction. It can be either a general approval or a specific approval. You are not going to get maximum marks. Related to the case study, if the case study says says that Johnny is and he wants to sell his shares, or the company wants approval, it will not be a approval. Shares they want to buy. So tailor make your answer according to the case study, according to the facts in the case study. Similarly, there must be the requirements as stated in section 89 state that an offering circular to the shareholders, so that for the protection of shareholders, so that if it's a general approval and they want to buy back 50% of the Class A shares, ordinary shares can get the opportunity to make use of this offer to sell back their shares. However, the Act says that the offering circular is not required if resolution dispenses of it, does away with it, says it's not necessary. Or if the company is listed on the Namibia Stock Exchange, the Namibia Stock Exchange. Now, once again, tailor make your answer. If it is a general approval, so they want to buy back a certain percentage or number of shares of a particular class, the offering circular will have to be sent. A special resolution cannot say it's not necessary, because they must get the opportunity. If, however, it's just Johnny's shares that they're buying back, they don't need to send an offering circular to the rest of the company, because they're not interested in buying back the shares of the rest of the company. They're only interested in buying back Johnny's shares. So read your case study. If the case study refers to them wanting to buy back Johnny's shares, don't write in your answer that an offering circular must be sent to the shareholders. Rather say the offering circular will not be required. If it's a private company, don't tell me an offering circular does not have to be sent if the company is listed on the Namibia Stock Exchange. Because it's a private company, it won't be listed. So yes, you've studied the requirements, but you have to decide carefully which of these requirements are relevant. Company must be solvent and liquid. If the company is not solvent and liquid, they can get the money back from the shareholders. They can claim their money back from the shareholders. If they can't, the directors can be held jointly and severally liable. But once again, what are they jointly and severally liable for? Don't suddenly become jointly and severally liable for all the debts of the company. They become jointly and severally liable for the amount paid to, oops, what spelling is that? So be careful when you answer. This doesn't only apply to this question. In general, be careful what you write. Don't just write down anything that crosses your mind, hoping that you might actually get a random mark for it, because you'll be more inclined to actually lose marks. Okay, so back to the layout of the exam. Case study, read your case studies carefully to determine exactly what the facts are. Tailor make your case study according to the relevant facts of the actual question. Another unit that is important okay, if I say here important units, that does not mean that you can ignore the rest. You can absolutely not ignore the rest. As you just saw there, when I was discussing capital maintenance, and I pointed out you must be specific. You have to, when you read your case study, make a mental note of what type of company this is. This is knowledge that you got already in Unit 3, types of companies. So if I'm not listing Unit 3 amongst the important units, that doesn't mean ignore Unit 3. Company law forms a whole. It's intertwined. You cannot separate knowledge, information that you got in the earlier units from the later units. The units don't stand alone. But then specifically, I have already mentioned Unit 13. That's capital maintenance. Unit 15, and I must still upload, I will do that tonight. I must still upload the lectures on Unit 15. Auditors, always important. Have a look there, make sure you're comfortable with the appointment of auditors.
Sorry to interrupt, ma'am.
Yes, my dear.
Yes, capital maintenance is Unit 14 and not 13.
What is Unit 13 then?
Unit 13, can I just make sure? Representation of a company.
Okay, so you're saying that is 14, but 15 is auditors.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me make a note of this quickly. So 13 is representation. Okay, thanks for that.
Okay.
Okay, and 15 is auditors. Look
Yes,
at the appointment and removal of auditors, and also at the civil liability. Somebody wants to hold the auditors liable. You need to know the elements of a delict. Read your questions question carefully. What am I asking? If I'm asking, he prove I'm on what if, however, I'm asking, will he succeed? You need to apply these elements to the facts. But if I'm just asking what must he prove, I'm not asking you to come to a conclusion as to his chances of success. But rather the elements of the delict. Also not saying just list. I could ask you a short question in question 2. List the elements that of a delict. And then it's at fault. Oh my goodness, what are these requirements, these elements? Act, wrongfulness, fault, damages, causation. If the question counts a little bit more than that, you need to briefly in one sentence, but only one sentence, explain what does the requirement, what does the element mean, what does the element entail, but also not a long essay, and you don't have to come to a conclusion. If, however, I'm asking you, will he succeed, then I need a deeper discussion with the matching facts. Okay, then of course, okay, and your classmate is just pointed this out, that I had my units wrong. Representation of a company, I told you already when we did that, that will absolutely be in the exam. Issues to look at when you're dealing with representation of a company is there actual authority? So is there express authority or is there implied authority? If there's none of these and the contract is unauthorized, there are 2 requirements to be met for the company to be bound. Firstly, the representative, so a representative in this position will usually have implied authority. So a managing director will usually have implied authority. They might not have implied authority in this particular instance because of special provisions in the Constitution. But normally, if there's nothing special in the Constitution, somebody in this position would have implied authority. And then secondly, the contract must be in the scope of the business. So representation is important. Doesn't necessarily have to be a 10-mark question. Check how much information you must give. Check your mark allocation. representation of a company can only be a 5-mark question. You just give the bare bones, but remember you must come to a conclusion. Then, if the lady that helped me out previously can help me out again, I think this is Unit 10. If you can just double check for me. Director's duties. Double check for me, ma'am, if you don't mind, whether it is actually Unit 10. I think Unit 8 starts directors. That's appointment and removal of directors. And then Unit 10.
Yes, Unit 10 is
It
duties
is
and
Unit 10,
liabilities of
miss.
directors.
Okay, so directors' duties, specifically the duty of good faith. That's always the most important duty. Make sure you understand the duty of good faith. Wait, let me just get to my page here where I'm typing. So you have your duty of good faith. But you also have the duty of care and skill. Don't mix them up. They're two separate duties. There's no such a thing as the fiduciary duty of care and skill. I will surely fail you on purpose if you write about the fiduciary duty of care and skill. But sometimes a single act of a director can actually be a breach of both these duties. Let's say the director entered into an unauthorized contract. But at the same time, when he entered into this unauthorized contract, he did not apply proper professional judgment and check the quality, etc., of the goods that he was buying. So he entered into an unauthorized contract, but it was in the scope of the business. So the company has to pay the creditor. But then the company loses a lot of money because the stuff that he bought is practically worthless and they paid far too much for it. That will be a duty of a breach of two duties. It will be a breach of his duty of good faith because he exceeded of his authority. Breach of duty of good faith. He also breached his duty of care and skill because he was negligent. What can the company claim? And don't tell me that he is liable for the amount of the contract. He is not ever liable for the amount of the contract. If they spent $1 million on this contract, they had to pay the creditor $1 million. That does not mean the stupid director is liable for $1 million. They can't hold him liable for the contract. I'm going to repeat that. They can't hold him liable for the contract. The company is liable for the contract. What can they claim is damages. And you know how to prove, you've learned on various occasions how to prove damages. The actual, if they paid $1 million for this stuff and it was of poor quality, for a lot, please understand that. And then, of course, this goes without saying, Unit 8, general meetings. Obviously, told you it's going to be there. I am not going to say anything about general meetings. I'm not going to revise this. I'm not going to discuss it in tonight's class. I had an entire lecture based on general meetings where I went through an example of a question step by step, showing you how I expect of you to answer. Please go back to that lecture, listen to that lecture, work through that particular example again. Do you have any questions? I hope you've been listening because I have literally just given you the entire exam. I wish you the best. I am still on the WhatsApp group. If you have specific questions, please do ask. Don't private me with questions about the work. Please ask on the group so that I can share the answers with everybody. But I am available up until when you write. Good luck with the exam. Good luck with your other exams. Good luck with your futures. If you are on campus, pop in and come and greet me. Last week on Saturday, I had the privilege, like 4,000 Colombians watch the cricket. It was if you were there, you've read about in the absolutely fantastic. So yes, yes. Yes.
I don't know if it's only on my end, but I didn't hear a single thing you said. The last thing I heard where you were fortunate enough to meet, I don't know who you met. After that, it just went.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Rochelle, it's not important. I was fortunate. I was at the cricket, and a young gentleman came running up to me with his arms open, and he embraced me and he said, Miss Hanekom, Miss Hanekom. And it turns out I taught him company law a couple of years ago. That's the story that I was telling, in the light of, if you ever bump into me, please greet me. I haven't had the privilege of meeting you face to face, but I do feel that we have almost become friends from seeing you in class regularly twice a week. Ms. Khwamus, if you see me, you can teach me again how to pronounce your first name. Those of you that are based in Windhoek, do come and say hello to me. I would like to meet you personally. Good luck with your futures. It's been good. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Miss. Bye.